In 1931, Al Capone entered a Chicago courtroom facing the case that would finally send him to prison. But he was not on trial for murder, bootlegging, or any of the violence associated with his criminal empire. Federal prosecutors were trying to prove something far less dramatic. Capone had made a fortune and failed to pay income tax on it. How did unpaid taxes accomplish what years of investigators into America's most notorious gangster could not? By the end of the 1920s, Capone had become almost inseparable from Chicago's reputation from organized crime. His organization made money through gambling, illegal liquor, and other rackets, but proving Capone personally committed a specific crime was another matter. He insulated himself carefully from the businesses that produced his wealth. Treasury investigators later reported that Capone kept no bank accounts, maintained no personal business records, bought no property in his own name, and conducted most of his financial dealings in cash. Investigators could see the expensive lifestyle, but connecting the money directly to Capone was difficult. The federal government therefore began approaching him from a different direction. Instead of proving where every dollar came from, investigators would attempt to prove that Capone received substantial taxable income and knowingly failed to report it. Treasury Special Agent Frank Wilson began piecing together Capone's finances from witnesses, checks, Western Union transfers, and fragments of records. The investigators discovered something remarkably useful among the papers already in government possession. Years earlier, police had seized a bookkeeping record from a Chicago gambling establishment associated with the Capone organization. According to Wilson's later report, the book had been sitting unidentified among miscellaneous papers until he had recognized what it contained. Its pages recorded the daily profits of large gambling operations known as the Hawthorne Smoke Shop, later called the Ship and the Subway. Investigators traced most of the handwriting to Leslie Shumway, who had worked there as the manager and cashier. They eventually located Shumway and secretly brought him before the grand jury. Suddenly, the government possessed something Capone had spent years avoiding: records and a witness capable of explaining what those records meant. On June 5, 1931, a federal grand jury indicted Capone on 22 counts involving his income taxes for the years 1925 through 1929. 11 days later, Capone appeared before Judge Wilkerson and pleaded guilty to the tax charges as well as separate prohibition charges. Capone apparently believed a relatively short sentence could follow the plea. The FBI records that he even told reporters he expected about 2.5 years. But Wilkerson made it clear that the court was not bound by any agreement or recommendation. Capone eventually withdrew his guilty plea and the case headed towards trial. The government would now have to prove what Capone had spent years trying to conceal. When the trial began in October, prosecutors built their case piece by piece. Witnesses connected Capone with gambling profits and other income. Financial evidence showed money moving to him through cash, checks, and wire transfers. Prosecutors also documented his extravagant spending and presented evidence that he understood he was required to pay federal income taxes. Capone's defense attacked the government's calculations and witnesses, but there was another battle taking place outside of the testimony. Frank Wilson later reported that Capone's organization had obtained the original jury list and attempted to influence prospective jurors. After authorities learned what was happening, Judge Wilkerson substituted another jury panel and eventually ordered the selected jurors kept together and guarded during the trial. Capone could conceal ownership and operate largely in cash, but this time, the government had constructed a case that did not depend upon catching him with a gun or a bottle of illegal whiskey. On October 17, 1931, after hours of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Capone was found guilty of 3 felony counts of income tax evasion, covering 1925, 1926, and 1927, along with 2 misdemeanor counts for failing to file income tax returns for 1928 and 1929. On November 24th, Judge Wilkerson imposed a sentence totaling 11 years behind bars, along with a $50,000 fine, prosecutor costs, and the government's demand for unpaid taxes and interest. Capone appealed, but the conviction stood, and in 1932, he entered federal prison. He would be later transferred to Alcatraz. The man whose name had become synonymous with the violence and corruption of Prohibition-era Chicago had finally been removed from the streets, but not because prosecutors proved one of the murders attributed to the underworld around him. They followed money that Capone had tried not to leave behind. In the end, the records of gambling profits, wire transfers, witnesses, and unpaid taxes accomplished what years of more conventional investigators had not. Al Capone built his power by operating outside of the law, but the government finally brought him down by proving that even illegal money was still income. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you would like to further support the Eclectic Historical Society, you can do so by joining us on Patreon or by visiting eclectichistoricalsociety.com to check out our merchandise. Until next time, this is the Eclectic Historical Society, and remember, history is lost if it is not repeated.